the Republican Party right now is behaving in a way that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. They are apparently willing to lose control of the House of Representatives and possibly the United States Senate, to lose control of that, to maybe even lose the control of some state houses and governor's races around the country, in exchange for putting a cranky, pasty old white man on the Supreme Court who believes that the president should have, essentially unlimited power while he's in office, or at least unlimited immunity, and that social welfare programs and socialism are evil things. Now, why would they be willing to do that? Why are these members of Congress willing to give up their own power in order to turn our government over to a group of people on the, in order to turn our government over to the Democrats? Why would they be willing to do that? Because they figured out back in 1954, when we had the Brown versus Board of Education, Earl Warren was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and all over this country, but particularly in the South, were these, because this was, school integration, right? Particularly in the South, but all over the country, the John Birch Society was putting up big billboards that said, "Impeach Earl Warren." I remember driving by them when I was a little kid in Michigan. That was in 1954. Conservatives were enraged that the Supreme Court, which had turned, I won't say liberal, but it had stopped being right-wing, hardcore fundamentalist in 1937. And even with Earl Warren, who had been put on the court by Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican. Earl Warren was a moderate Republican. He was an Eisenhower Republican. And he said, this Plessy versus Ferguson decision in 1898, where the Supreme Court looked at a law in Massachusetts that said that if facilities for white people and people of color were equal, then they could be separate, because the law, the 14th Amendment, called for equality, but it did not call for mixing of the races. This was the law in Massachusetts, right? The U.S. Supreme Court looked to that law in 1898 and said, well, if it's good enough for Massachusetts, it's good enough for the country. Separate but equal is the, and boom, you had legal segregation. And in 1954, the United States Supreme Court under Earl Warren looked at that Supreme Court decision and said, we're going to overturn Plessy. And they did. And that was the first moment in the 1950s when the Russell Kirk conservatives figured out that they were going to continue to try and get what they wanted and get where they wanted, the old-fashioned traditional political way of controlling the Senate, the House, and the White House. But they did that several times since then, and it never got them what they wanted. It never got the destruction of socialism and the destruction of the Democratic Party. So, after Roe v. Wade in 1973, based on Lewis Powell's memo 2 years earlier, the right said, okay, what do we have to do? We have to pack the Supreme Court. And thus, first we got Scalia, then we got Thomas, then we got Roberts. I mean, you go through the list, right? And so now their Hail Mary strategy, they have not been able to destroy Social Security. They have tried so hard so many times. They have not been able to destroy Medicare. They have tried so hard so many times. But the Supreme Court can do it for them, and will, with Brett Kavanaugh.